All right. Hi, folks. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another edition of Syelo Tank. I'm really excited today because we have BrightHire in the tank. We've heard so many great things from members of the Syelo community that use BrightHire, from senior advisors that I believe might even be advisors to BrightHire that are also representing the ecosystem. And I personally, I've heard of y'all, I've heard of BrightHire, but I don't truly know all the ins and outs of what your product does. So I know I'm extremely excited to learn about BrightHire today. I'm excited to have Ben in the tank with us, who's the CEO and founder of BrightHire, and who's going to be jumping in and giving us the demo. With that said, as y'all know, the way the structure ultimately breaks down is we'll do about a 20-minute demo with Ben. At that point, we will do a Q&A session, followed by a reverse Q&A session. And that is the schedule. That is the agenda. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton on over to Ben so that you can kick off. Ben, welcome to Hello. It's great to have you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and appreciate everyone joining day after Memorial Day weekend. And yeah, I'm super excited to share. I guess just to calibrate going in, show of hands, who knows what we do at some level of, at some high level. Is everyone somewhat familiar, or okay, cool. Very helpful. Well, I'm going to kick it off. 20 minutes is, there's a lot, actually kind of a lot to get through in 20 minutes. So I'm going to go through some slides very quickly just to orient you about what we are, why we exist, and give you a scope of the product, because I feel like it generally makes it a little bit easier to understand what you're seeing as I go through the product, to understand, kind of the scope of the product itself. And then I'll hop back, and then glad to jump back in and go deeper on anything that folks are really interested in, excited about, because there is quite a bit to cover in a 20-minute demo of the platform. But yeah, super excited and really appreciate everyone sharing their time with me today. So without further ado, let me share my screen. Cool. Can everyone see my screen? Thumbs up. Awesome. Let me just expand you all so I can see your faces. Cool. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm Ben. I'm the co-founder and CEO of BrightHire. Yeah, just quick backstory. So BrightHire is almost 5 years old, which is a little bit crazy for me to think about. It kind of feels like we started yesterday, and it kind of feels like a decade ago. I'm not really sure. But we were founded with the mission to give everyone the hiring experience they deserve. BrightHire came out of my personal experience. So a lot of folks say that they fell into the world of people in HR. I kind of did, but I actually studied it in college. So I was a labor relations major and went and worked for a research company called Corporate Executive Board, which is it's now part of Gartner, which was a best practice research business and with a big focus on HR. And I spent 4 years there. So really started my career thinking about people and why they're so important to organizations. I've always been very passionate about it. Actually dovetails really well with Syelo. It was a network of professionals sharing best practices and learning from each other. So I have very deep appreciation for what you all are building here. And from there, I got into the world of tech and ended up head of people and talent and COO of a company. And we scaled from early stage to a couple hundred people. And that experience gave me kind of two things. One, it really makes you appreciate that who you hire is the company you build, and full stop. And especially when you sign every offer and you talk to every candidate for hundreds of people, it just becomes very clear that the process by which you build your team day in, day out couldn't be more important to your success. And also I wore the finance hat, and it was the single biggest place we allocated our capital, full stop, period. And so, the impetus for BrightHire was, this is the most important thing we do. And the heart of the process is dictated by people talking to each other, making hiring decisions. And that part's really hard, and people don't do it all the time. And it's staffed by a lot of folks that, it's their second job or third job. And how can we make this easier, and how can we make companies more successful and make the hiring process at the heart of it as rigorous as any other really important process in our business, because it's so critical. And at the same time, give candidates a much better experience, that give everyone the hiring experience they deserve. Before I got into HR and people space, I was really passionate about education and thinking about it from the job seeker point of view. And so all of those things led to starting BrightHire. And my co-founder has been in this space his whole career as well. And so when I mentioned him, doesn't it seem weird that the heart of the hiring process that drives all the outcomes is the hardest, and it's a black box, and there's no technology that's really been built to make it easier and better. He was the one that really had the spark for the actual solution itself, which I'll get into in a minute. But that's the backstory for BrightHire. Just came out of a lot of personal experience and realizing that there's just nothing more important we do as organizations. And for a job seeker, it's these are the most important experiences in their professional trajectory, and their professional trajectory sets the stage for their personal life in many really important ways. So how do we make this better? And since 2019, when we were founded, we've come a decent way, and gotten a few things accomplished since then. We've gotten the opportunity to work with some just amazing companies, some of which bought in on what we were doing very, very early. And obviously we're forever in their gratitude for their partnership, helping to build our business and our product. And we've also gotten to work with some just amazing advisors, some of which are listed here, some are not, along the way, that have really shaped the product that we've built. And I'm really excited to share with you all today. So BrightHire, as a platform, again, was built first and foremost to make hiring a first class process in the organization, in the way it deserves. And as I mentioned, the starting place was, interviews and hiring decisions drive all of our outcomes, and it's really hard to get right. So how do we solve that? And so we actually started with the bottom, which is our kind of our interview product, and then built a plan product separately. But this is the scope of what we do, and it's really an end-to-end platform for interview excellence, and interview excellence is hiring excellence, full stop. And so one part of the platform that I'll share today is called BrightHire Plan. This is something we launched at the beginning of this year. And it came just from a pain point of our customers. There's no good interview process, no good hiring process with a great plan, but generally that's a tension between taking lots of time and being really thoughtful, and speed and efficiency, and it's actually really hard. So we built an end-to-end platform kind of powered by AI that helps you scope role to figure out what are we looking for, uses that kind of infrastructure of the scope to build a job description and then optimize it, sort of like a Texio or one of those sort of products, for both the language and also the sort of the readability and all that, and then helps you build a full structured interview plan, and you can do the whole thing in a couple minutes, and instead of hours or weeks, depending on the organization. And then the other product is our interview product, and so very simply, we try to make every interview better, which I'll show you. We do that in a few different ways. First is taking away the distraction of note taking, or trying to remember what to cover. So we automatically record, transcribe, and summarize interviews, which I'll share. And then we also bring structure into the conversation. So if you run structured interviews in your organization, we actually pull those and automatically display those in real time as a guide for an interviewer. So it just makes the job easier. Like that's the goal. It's like let's make a hard job, which interviewing is. It's not natural. A lot of people don't do it all the time. Let's make that easier by removing as much cognitive load as possible. And then after the conversation, we take that amazing context, right? All this really, really important information a candidate is sharing throughout their candidacy. We don't want to lose that or have it be left to our memory and our recollection. I have a terrible memory, so that might have also been an impetus for BrightHire, which is feeling like I have to furiously write down everything someone tells me to not lose track of it and do a disservice to them. And so a candidate is sharing incredible amounts of very valuable information about their qualifications in these conversations. Let's capture them, let's structure them, and let's make them available to the hiring team, so that they can make more evidence-based, more confident hiring decisions, and that over time, we can actually get better overall in terms of how we make decisions, how we assess candidates, how calibrated we are, so on and so forth. And then we are now turning interviews into data, which never existed before. And because interviews are so determinant on all of our outcomes from a talent perspective, that data has a lot of power. And so we provide a set of insights, analytics that help an organization, particularly at scale, quantify the effectiveness of their interviews. Like, are we doing a good job? Are we doing what we want to be doing in terms of candidate experience, consistency, and so on and so forth? And then, you have visibility, right? It's just like sales or other parts of business where conversations drive every outcome. It's kind of hard to coach and up level if you don't have any visibility. And so part of the BrightHire is how do we just get better and better at this really important thing? And that comes from data and also just visibility, the ability to lean in, coach, train, enable. So that's the end-to-end platform. I know I'm talking kind of New Jersey fast, batteries sold separately speed. So please cut me off, ask questions. But let me pause there. Happy to answer any initial questions about just kind of like the scope of the product in the platform. There's quite a bit there. There's quite a bit that I haven't covered at this high level, but let me pause. Any initial questions? Cool. I'll forge ahead in the interest of time. So I think, our platform, I think has always been really powerful. I would say in the last year and a half, certainly the quick innovations as it relates to AI have been applied to our platform in a completely transformational and native way, meaning the use case and what we do is perfectly well suited for a lot of sort of the innovation that you see from an AI perspective. And a couple things. One, we don't use AI to like rank, grade, score, and make hiring decisions. That's not how AI is used in our platform. Our AI is built to make people better at something that's really important in a bunch of ways. And I think the thing that's most powerful as it relates to applying AI in our platform is it kind of solves one of these big trade-offs that we've always been confronted with from a TA perspective, where there's often a tension between speed and efficiency and like having to move fast with quality and rigor. And what's amazing about the applications that you'll see in the demo today is you'll see that it kind of obviates that trade-off. There's so many use cases where it's both more efficient but also better, and we can accomplish those things at the same time. And I think that's something that we are truly excited about, and it's been really exciting, I think, for our customers to see as we've innovated in the platform. And the reason people buy BrightHire, just to be very, very concrete, is threefold. One is to improve quality. How do we improve the quality of the process that we run, and as a result, improve the quality of the outcomes we see, the quality of hire? And that comes from a few different things. One is when you run better, more effective interviews, you get better results. And two, when you're capturing more complete, more accurate context and feedback on candidates at the individual interview level and at the aggregate level, you can make better hiring decisions. You can be better calibrated. You can be more confident. And then lastly, we can kind of continuously improve by up-leveling and training and enabling our teams to be successful doing this really important job. So that's thing one. The second is, a lot of our clients are, like I'm sure many of you are, and we are motivated to make the process more equitable. And the way that we accomplish that is helping facilitate structured and consistent interviews. I think most of our clients, are big advocates for that, and we help make that easier to operationalize, making hiring decisions more transparent, objective, and evidence-based. And then we provide them a bunch of data and visibility that allows them to actually dig in. And then lastly, efficiency. And I think this is one where, the platform is pretty transformed in the last year and a half, 2 years. We can save teams tons of time creating interview plans, writing up interview notes and submitting feedback. And then while those are really important and they add up, actually a huge amount of time is saved being better calibrated, reducing false negatives, and actually making the funnel much more efficient as a result of having BrightHire. So let me pause there, and then I'll flip into the actual demo. But that's the why. That's when teams come and become, partner with us, it's generally for these reasons. And very often it's more than one. We want to level up. We want to drive talent density. And by the way, we can build a rock solid business case around the fact that we're going to just save our teams huge amounts of time, not just the recruiting team, but the organization. We're going to operate much more efficiently in ways that are really important. So I'll pause there before I hop in, and then I can get into the demo. Any questions? No. Cool. Oh, and I should have mentioned this. Teams love BrightHire. Like this is the joy of my job is like this feedback. There's not that many pieces of enterprise software, and I think recruiting software, I'm going to go on a limit that get the level of just like end user love. And like, it was very easy for me to pull this slide together. I could have picked 500 more of these screenshots because I take them all and we put them in a Slack channel and celebrate them. But it's just it makes the job of hiring easier and makes people more confident, and they love the platform for that. And so that's a huge part of what we do. It's just, this is a platform for everyone, and it's to make a hard job easier, right? And ultimately make us more successful. And that's something that everyone wants. All right, so let me stop there. I'm going to hop into the demo. To start, I'm gonna show plan. So I'm going to start with our plan product. So What does that look like? How does it work? And then I'll show the interview product secondly. So for plan, as I mentioned, the scope is kind of, there's three pieces to it, right? It's called job description creator, but it's really, think of it more as like scoping the responsibilities, the skills, kind of building the architecture for what are we looking for. So I'll start there. And then the optimizer, it is an optimizer, but it really generates the job description, and you can put a bunch of controls around that and then optimize it. And then there's an interview plan builder. And so this is what plan looks like. Here's BrightHire. You can see all the different pieces of it. And I'm going to start with a product marketing role that we're actually about to open up as the example. And so this is one that I've just kind of started. But basically, I put in literally a job title. It's a remote role. I put in the location, and I answered a couple of quick questions, like a sentence about what this role more or less is about, and then a sentence more or less about, what makes it unique relative to potentially other product marketing roles in the world. And then BrightHire is going to basically have a dialogue with me to help me think about what matters for this role. And so I can go through and select, things that are suggested. So this is definitely about product positioning. It's definitely about customer evangelism. But actually, I'm going to broaden that out and call it like just customer marketing in general. Definitely about market strategy development. And then I'm going to add something that's really important for this role. Pat, what's really important for this role that I'm forgetting? Customer. Oh, yeah, for sure. Strategy. Cool. And then once I do that, BrightHire is just going to kind of keep presenting me the menu. So we're not making a decision. It's not ChatGPT where I put in a title and it's just going to spit out like whatever it thinks should be important. It's actually just going back and forth with me and helping me think through like what might be most important for this role. And so, yes, this is super important. Yes, market segmentation. Yes, like all these things are, pretty apt for that role. And so it's going to kind of go back and forth, and in 30 seconds, 60 seconds, I'm going to basically make a set of suggestions and selections based on this menu that's going to help build out, basically think of it as like, again, I think of it as like the architecture for the role. Product positioning, yes, unique value props, yes, this. And ultimately I'll go through and I'll build this out, and it'll essentially create, again, this infrastructure. And with this infrastructure, plus, on the back end, our clients can basically set like, this is our standard, EEOC statement or our standard intro, and this is the infrastructure. And then from here, it'll give me the option to like turn it into the job description. So I'll go back and forth with this. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'll show you one that's actually in flight. But that's the process, and it's remarkable in terms of how efficient it makes it to scope, but also big piece of feedback that we get from our clients is it just makes the job much easier for hiring managers. And so we see a few different patterns. Like some folks will actually just get on a quick call for 10 minutes with a hiring manager and actually go through this with them in real time. That's pretty common. Sometimes the recruiter will just do it and then be able to show up and say, okay, here's where I've landed, let's finalize this together. And then we have clients that'll just push this to hiring managers. We built this to make it self-serve, like a hiring manager should be able to go in and do this themselves. And we see all three of those patterns. It just depends on the client and sort of how they want to run things. But we've had amazing feedback on this product so far from our customers. And so, as I mentioned, once the infrastructure is built out, I basically hit like create, and it'll like draft the job description. Now, here's one that I've drafted. It's already in pretty good shape because we drafted it, but you can also start with an existing job description. You don't have to start from a blank slate and build from there. If you have existing job descriptions that you want to refresh or improve, you can literally just like paste them in to BrightHire, and we will scan it using basically established dictionaries of gendered language and a bunch of other sort of third parties to make some suggestions as to how you might improve both the clarity of the job description as well as the gender balance of the words themselves. And we'll help you can like simplify complex sentences really quickly and use AI to do that. And so once I've gotten this to a place that I'm happy with, I can then, it'll say like build interview plan, and I've already done this, so I'll show you a build interview plan. But just to show you what that looks like, essentially I would go in and I would select how many interviews is this? Is the first interview a recruiter screen? Is there anything else not in the sort of the infrastructure of the role that's important to test for? Like these are our values, or these are other attributes that are really important. You can actually also add those in the back end to be kind of standard, like in every interview plan that we create for our company, just like load these values and there's more to come. But that's kind of how it works. And so once it's built, let me show you what that looks like. BrightHire will create me this interview plan. So let me hide all the questions real quick. So you can see the AI sort of tries to allocate logically the elements that were in the job description that came from the infrastructure, right? We're pulling that thread to different interviews. So there's like a product marketing case study and sort of strategy interview that's been created. And that's all. And so for every one of these elements, it's coming directly from that initial set of selections I made, right? So it's using that infrastructure to then generate questions and then grouping them. And then I can edit them, I can change them, I can delete them. But this should get me 80% of the way there. So basically in a few minutes, I can go from, hey, I need to hire a head of product marketing or a director of product marketing to really thoughtfully scoping that role, building a really, well-crafted job description and a full draft structured interview plan. Again, that I can tweak and change, but it's gonna get me a really long way there in a few minutes. Let me pause there. Happy to answer any questions.
I'm sure you're probably going to cover this, but I know in Rippling's ATS, structuring out the interview process, not quite as in detail as this, but structuring out in this way, the integration and how that works with our ATS system.
Same question.
Great question. I don't have all the variants open, but we have an integration with a lot of ATSs that makes it easy to import this. So for instance, I have to go check on Rippling, they're a customer of ours. And so we definitely integrate with their ATS. We integrated with their ATS before they even had it public for them, which was fun. But for instance, in Greenhouse, like you'll see with some of our other integrations, we have a Chrome extension. So you could from the relevant pages in the ATS, open BrightHire fully and use it literally without leaving the ATS. And then in the case of Greenhouse, you can click a button on the interview kit creation page, select this guide, and then click a button and it drops the whole thing directly into the interview kit in Greenhouse and Lever and some of the other ATSs. I have to check on Rippling exactly how it works because sometimes it depends on how the ATS works itself. At a minimum, it's basically you can use BrightHire as an overlay on top of the ATS. So you don't have to go to BrightHire. You can literally be on the ATS and do it. But exactly how this part of the integration works kind of depends a little bit on the ATS and sort of how that ATS works. Does that help?
Yeah, very much.
Sorry,
thank you.
Offhand, I don't recall exactly how the Rippling version works. So that's BrightHire plan. Again, the scope of BrightHire plan is helping scope roles, building job description, and building full structured interview plans, and doing that in just a few minutes. Your question is actually a good segue. So I mentioned part of what makes the job easier for interviewers using BrightHire is the heads up display. It's pull whatever I need to cover. I'm a software engineer, I'm a sales rep, I'm jumping into an interview from another meeting, and I need to know, what do I need to cover and make me successful. And there's a few ways that we pull that sort of that plan into BrightHire. One is we'll do it from the ATS. So if you build interview kits or guides in the ATS, we can actually pull that. So BrightHire knows that I'm interviewing Pat for a head of marketing role on Tuesday at 4 o'clock, and it's the third stage, and this is the interview kit, and it joins automatically because it knows, and it's going to pull in the interview kit or the guide from the ATS and display that to me, which I'll show you in a second. You can also build interview plans and guides fully in BrightHire. So I've filtered down here just for the one that I'm about to show, but I can build full guides in BrightHire. I can assign them to a role. I can assign them to people. So you can instrument this all in BrightHire. And the reason we have this, is because we have a lot of clients that are on Workday, or they're on Smart Recruiters, or they're on a platform where the capabilities aren't necessarily as robust as they would like as it relates to running structured interviews and operationalizing them at scale. So they can use BrightHire to actually, build plans, assign them. They can even enable scoring. So we have full scoring in BrightHire for those platforms, which is nice because you can do it sort of in real time in the flow of work. And so for many of our clients, we're pulling it from the ATS, but for some that are on platforms that don't have all the functionality they want, they can actually just do the whole thing from BrightHire. And so this won't necessarily be the final submission into their ATS for hire, no hire, but in terms of collecting feedback and instrumenting structured interviews, they will use BrightHire for that. So with that, I'll go into sort of our interview product. I'm going to share my screen just to give you, because this is your Zoom, so I can't give you the full experience, but I'll give you the best version of a fake full experience I can for your Zoom meeting. Before I jump in, when we think about the interview product and in BrightHire in general, I have some slides on this later, but I think one really important thing is, as I mentioned, our mission is to give everyone the hiring experience they deserve. And so that extends to the whole way we build our product. So when you think about a solution like BrightHire, first and foremost, really, really important to put candidates first and build scalable compliance. Like this has to work for an organization, both in terms of, obviously the legal side and the compliance side, but just in terms of it has to work on the candidate experience side. And that exists before, during, and after an interview. And I'll go into a lot of details of, where that shows up. There's actually a lot that, we've built around this. But first and foremost, it's, scalable approach to consent, candidate being aware of, BrightHire and why the company might, our client might be using BrightHire, what's in it for them, so on and so forth. So all that's really, really important. And it starts before the interview ever starts. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just to give you awareness, like we support multiple sort of consent flows. We're global. We have clients hiring in like 5 continents. I think not 6, but maybe 6, but fully global, including, EU, South America, et cetera. So there's one flow that's just informed consent. There's one that's explicit consent. Informed consent is, hey, we're using BrightHire to record these interviews. Click here to opt out. So it's a one-click opt-out. We give our clients the ability to put candidates control time, and we can do this automatically, or sometimes they'll just put it into their existing candidate communications. We have both, and we can accommodate both. Or explicit consent, where a candidate, in the application flow will opt in. And then when a candidate joins a meeting like this, or a Zoom meeting, or sorry, a Teams meeting, et cetera, there's a notification upon joining the meeting. And you probably saw that actually when the recording was put on for this meeting as well. That's kind of built into Zoom and some of the other platforms. BrightHire works on Zoom, Teams, Meet, and phone. We actually have a huge volume of phone screens on BrightHire. You can use BrightHire, click to call from a browser, click to call your phone, and then call the candidate. You can use it from your phone, which is pretty cool. And you can even use BrightHire in person. So we cover sort of like all the scenarios. But yeah, we focus a lot on demoing on Zoom, but we do literally dozens of thousands of interviews on the phone every month on BrightHire from our clients. And once you join a Zoom BrightHire interview, it looks like this, and it'll have our client's logo. It'll say Miro note taker, or Bill note taker, or just your logo. First and foremost, it sounds very simple, but I can focus on you, not taking notes. And I know there's gonna be a perfect summary of the conversation as an interviewer. And we have a lot of really cool features, but that one's not to be lost. Like, it's just really, really valuable to know that you have a backstop and you can be fully present for your candidates and focus on them. It makes a massive difference in the quality of conversation. But then we also have what we call our interview assistant. And so in Zoom, it's actually a native Zoom app, which I can't demo a native Zoom app on your Zoom in this meeting, but it looks like this. So I'll give you an example. This is actually a phone call that I called myself before I jumped on this call. So an example of what it looks like on phone. But if this is a real, say, interview scheduled through my ATS, like through Greenhouse or something, all of this metadata would pull through automatically. It would know, again, that, Ben's the candidate and this is the role, and here's a link to their profile on the ATS, and so on and so forth. And it would actually pull through like the interview kit or the guide, or again, I can build it in BrightHire. And so I don't have to do anything because the AI is going to summarize and do all that for me, but there's no AI in my brain. So if I want to mark something that's relevant for me, or, take a note that's, my thoughts, or even tag Pat in this conversation and say, dig into this. Pat loves that because he's going to get an email afterwards that pulls him right into that moment. I can do that. And then, again, I have like the guide in front of me, and I don't have to, BrightHire is automatically going to detect and know when I cover what, but I may just want to like attach my own note to a specific question or leave feedback. And for our clients that are on, a workday, they can actually score against competencies in real time, which is really nice because it's kind of like in the flow of doing the conversation. And that's it. The BrightHire interviews are really, it's in the flow of work. Like, there's no new work for end users. That's one of the reasons that, folks like it so much is for an interviewer, there's not much to learn. BrightHire is going to show up to your interview. It's going to take your notes for you and make your life easier. It's going to pull in the guide. And then after the conversation, BrightHire is going to send you a Slack or an email or both, depending on what integrations you want us to set up. And it's going to pull you right back into the output of the conversations. Say, here's your interview from BrightHire, view the recording, or here's a link to your scorecard. We actually give you both. We'll give you a link to BrightHire and a link to the scorecard if we have it. And away you go. So it's super in the flow of work for folks. And the output of a BrightHire interview looks like this. And I'm going to minimize you all a little bit just so I can see my screen a bit better. But this is an interview I did with Cami, who's now on our team. She's a designer. She's responsible for a lot of the beautiful UI that you see. And I interviewed her, or this is actually Morgan, one of my colleagues, interviews with Cami. But you can see, things that you'd expect. So full audio, full video. If it's a video interview, full transcript that I can search. I can go back to a quick moment where maybe she talked about UX or something. I could see where Cami talked and where Morgan talked. I could listen to just Cami if I want to listen really quickly, and I can put it on 1.5x speed and just get through the whole interview in 5 minutes. So all the kind of functionality that maybe you would expect. I can add a note. I could tag someone in a moment. I can flag things. I could create clips really easily. So I can say, I want to start it here and end it here. And I can share this with Pat, or I can share a set of clips with Pat as like a playlist. So, hey, Pat, check out these few clips from Cami. Let me know what you think. This is the, first few candidates I've spoken with for the role. So a lot of things that maybe you would expect from a platform like BrightHire, but, super robust. And then, any notes that we took manually, like in the interview assistant, will be here. Because again, there's no AI in our brain. So if we have our own observations, we want to capture those. So those go here. And then we use AI to summarize the conversation. So, our default model for that is we detect any salient job relevant topics or questions that are asked, and then the candidate's response. And just to be clear, we're not rewriting the candidate's response. What we're actually doing is making it very concise. So we take the candidate's words and we just kind of strip out the filler and make a concise summary of that. So I can view it that way. I can actually view it as like a bunch of different views. So we actually have a model built for intake calls or debriefs or what have you. Here's actually we call these like templates. We actually have a template that's like the scorecard. So if you have good structured scorecards with questions, we can actually view the content of the conversation, summarize as it relates to the items that were in the scorecard itself, which I'll show you a bit more in a bit. And I can even create my own. So like you can see I have my own templates I've created for user research calls or what have you. But this is really great for, say, like recruiter screens. So, every time I run a recruiter screen, I want to set this as my default, and I want to summarize, the candidate conversations in terms of, what's their work background, professional history, what are some of their key accomplishments, what are their motivations, what are they looking for next steps. Like I can structure it however I want, and BrightHire is going to automatically summarize it in that format for me every time. So there's a whole bunch of functionality there. And if I part of our process, if we write like write-ups on our candidates, we actually have a workflow around that. So I can, BrightHire will automatically basically detect, topics that come up in the conversation as it relates to hiring, and then generate a summary based on that. And I can add more topics if there's something that, I don't see here that, I thought was important, but maybe wasn't detected. I can change the format. And then we have like an assistant. So maybe I want to write like an advancement email really quick to Cami to tell her that we're moving to the next step, or maybe I want to like see if we got to a certain question or a certain topic in the conversation. I can click through this button, I can interact with this assistant, and it'll basically help me, interface with it. So that's kind of the output of a specific interview. There's some other things here. Here's all the clips that we've created for this interview. There's a lot because we demo this a lot, but let me pause there. Happy to answer questions on this before I kind of move forward.
What's it cost?
We'll get there. No, our pricing is based on the size of our organization. It's actually a super simple pricing model. It's basically how big is the company, just to keep it really simple. There's no cap on interviewers, or anything like that, because people come in and out of the hiring process. It's like impossible to keep track of seats. So we just keep it as simple as possible. And then we have a slightly different pricing structure because we do have some sort of like large agencies on the platform. So that's the output of a specific interview. And then if I was to go to like the ATS, we try to make BrightHire as in the flow of work as possible. So I can actually I'm on a scorecard right now. I can go to that scorecard, access the full interview, like basically the full application right from there. And actually in one click, it'll match up all the AI summarized notes and any of my notes to any of the relevant fields in the scorecard and fill out the whole thing. It's not making the recommendation. Like I'm still going to go in here and add my color and my analysis and score the candidate. But what it takes, it fundamentally changes the ask of interviewers. You're no longer asking folks to be like a stenographer and write all the details of all the scenarios and examples. They are an analyst. You know, their job is to provide judgment. And we are going to bring in the candidate, the candidate data, the context from the conversation that's relevant for that analysis. And so we cut interview feedback time down by, like 90%. It's just super efficient. So that's kind of the individual interview output. And this is kind of the integration on top of the ATS. And then of course, we didn't just have one conversation with Cami, we had a few conversations. And so we can now think of all of that context and access it. So I can obviously jump into every one of the individual interviews really easily. I can see a quick kind of rundown, like what do we cover and not cover in these interviews. This is super helpful if you're a recruiter or a hiring manager. You're not in all the conversations. And so you want to know, like, what do we get to? What do we not get to? You may want to dive in. There's actually an even easier way to dive in, which is, if something comes up like Cami switched from visual design to product design, right? So a big question was around like user experience and all the kind of craft of doing actual product design. So if I want to jump into like, where she may have talked about UX or user research, I can just quickly search. These are all AI generated highlights based on, questions that were asked or like detected like important topics that came up. And so it just puts evidence at the fingertips so fluidly to be able to feel confident around hiring decisions. I can also, there's a few other things I can do here. I can take two late stage candidates, and if I want, sort of watch, one-to-one moments of theirs that we automatically detect side by side. And again, all of this is accessible from the ATS. So if I'm on the candidate's profile page in my ATS, I can just open the candidate profile in BrightHire right from here. I can literally like browse and filter the highlights right from here. So if we're on a debrief and we're talking about a candidate, I don't have to go to BrightHire. I can actually just do it from the ATS. Obviously, I can pop out to BrightHire to do it, but again, it's to be in the flow of work and just really seamless. And then, taking that a step further, you'll see like closing risks here. We have a feature that we built not that long ago called candidate alerts. The idea is, as a recruiter, if I have, I'm just making up a number, like 5 recs with 10 candidates for each that are active in some part of the process, that's 50 candidates. That's a lot to keep track of in terms of things that may influence their closability, action items, and so on and so forth. And a lot of really important information comes up in conversations that I'm not in with my hiring team. And so how do I keep my finger on the pulse of that? And so that's closing risks. It's really candidate alerts, but we put like a closing risk tag on the candidate profile to keep everyone kind of focused. And so if I was to go to like another page in the ATS, I could see literally like a list of these. I could filter them for like closing risks. I'm not going to go into them specifically. I don't have like a great demo environment for that, so I don't want to kind of share all that data. But it would call out things like, first of all, it's amazingly useful. We're hiring right now, and I can't tell you how valuable it is. But if a candidate says, they're maybe not sure about the comp for the role or the timing, or they have like an open question about the company, we'll detect those things and surface them as closing risks, just to help you stay on top of those. And then action items. If there's like a specific promise made to a candidate, maybe a hiring manager tells a candidate, hey, I'll send you this thing, by the end of the week, so on and so forth. Like we don't want to drop those balls. So we're going to capture those automatically and surface them up for a recruiter. And it's going to surface all of the alerts that are for the conversations that you are in, but also for all of your candidates. So any candidate that's associated with a role where you're the recruiter, for instance, it'll surface those. And you can actually filter between like your alerts and somebody else's alerts. Let me pause there. I've been talking a lot. I don't know if there's questions in the chat that I'm not seeing or missing, but
No, there's
yeah.
comments about that last feature being pretty dang useful.
Yeah.
Questions, anybody?
Yeah, any questions before I keep kind of forging ahead?
Yeah, I know you're continuing on with the demo, so maybe this is in there, but since the mission is really focusing on candidate experience, is there anything that's being captured from all of these conversations that would be helpful to provide to a candidate to improve?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is yes. Like there's tons of valuable stuff that would be helpful to capture. I think what we've always we've always wondered is, what is the feature we can build around that we think a lot of our clients would adopt and use? So there's no technical limitation, and I think it would be incredibly valuable. I'll give you an example of something that we've considered before, but technically is not as simple. This actually one is a little hard technically, is like giving the candidate their side of the conversation. Like, cool, you may not be comfortable giving the candidate access to the conversation or automated feedback. Like there's some concern around that. But what if we could give the candidate just their half of the conversation? That's actually just technically a little bit hard because we can't perfectly split the conversation. But the short answer is yes. And we would love to be able to build a feature around it. And I don't think we've landed on like the feature we think that the majority of our clients would be comfortable using. I think the value that we indirectly can provide is one, it needs like a mirror to the face of an organization's in regards to their practices as it relates to candidate experience and doing a good job. But like more practically, what we've heard from our customers is it makes it way easier for our clients that do provide feedback to provide good feedback, because now you can go in and you can like pull out context, examples, and the like from interviews so much faster and more efficiently and much more concretely that it makes the process of, you know, for our clients that do as a practice provide feedback to do that really well and to do it really fast. But that's a great question that we've talked about quite a lot over the years. And I don't know if we landed on the right thing. Like we could even do something like auto code, like give sort of very generalized coaching and feedback. And if there was enough appetite from our customers, we would absolutely build it. I think we just did the right thing that most people would be like comfortable and sign up for.
Yeah, no, it's tricky, but thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. Cool. I will continue to forge ahead because I'm conscious of time. So that's kind of just to go back and put it in the frame of the product scope. You know, that's kind of a decent summary of, you know, running an interview. How do we make it just an easier activity and make folks more successful doing it? And then how do we summarize a lot of the context as it relates to providing great interview feedback for hiring decisions and having better information at a candidate level? We're actually doing some really cool stuff at the candidate level, which I'll show in a little bit, just taking it kind of to the next level in terms of raising the talent bar and feeling confident around quality of hire. But, you know, a big part of what we do is also providing visibility in data, right? This is an incredibly critical process. It sets the stage of success for an organization. How do we then equip that team with new data and information that helps them sort of continuously improve? And we do that through insights, just like visibility and training. So let me hop in first to insights. So this is kind of like our insights home. It's actually about to get kind of upgraded, and I don't want to say upgraded because it's pretty awesome, but it's going to get more investment, which I'll share in a minute. But we have a ton of data that we capture. Like these are all these individual metrics that we capture, and then we roll it up. So this is kind of like the main dashboard where we put some of the key metrics, and then we are automatically detecting trends and bubbling up like tips, basically, so that you don't have to go slice and dice and look for what's happening. We can try to automatically find some of those opportunities and surface them. So, you know, one is around like candidate experience. So we measure things like on-time starts and talk balance in interviews. And you can see we bubbled up that, you know, their candidates receive less than 30% talk time in interviews for 3 positions, which is curious to say the least. So I may want to dive into that. And if I dive into it, this is where I'll go into like the really deep view. So you can see it's like pre-filtered for those 3 roles and so on and so forth. And it's showing me kind of those trends. But if I remove this filter real quick and I change it to interviewer, you'll see that like for all of these metrics, it's really robust. Like you can slice and dice by department, by position, by specific interviewers, by interview stage. So I can look at metrics like just for recruiter screens, just for this department, you know, where maybe we're seeing like a low conversion rate from recruiter screen, you know, to hiring manager or to onsite. And I want to understand kind of why. And I can, you know, filter for low to high, high to low. I can group it by interviewer department. So I can group it in a bunch of ways. I can filter in a bunch of ways. And we pull in a lot of the metadata from, you know, depending on your ATS, we'll pull in metadata from the ATS to enable this. That's how we know how to group it based on like department or role. And then I can actually even click through. So let me pick a good example. Let me do all. Okay, so this is a real example. This is for our company. And this is, we measure like the longest monologue, which I will fail miserably in this conversation, of course. But this is actually a real example. So this is a recruiter who was working with us, and like kind of off the charts on longest monologue. And so very curious. And so I could actually click in almost like Looker, if you've ever used those analytics, to the underlying data behind the metric. And then in one more click, jump into the actual interview itself. And then, yeah, there's a really long monologue from Alex. And when I jumped into those really long monologues, it turned out it was like a really long about BrightHire pitch that was taking 5 minutes plus. And one, that's not very engaging. And two, it wasn't a very good pitch. So, I was able to go from like very high level to drilling into the underlying data to drilling into a specific coaching example in like 2 minutes or 30 seconds, as it were. So that's kind of the individual data. And we even pull in stuff from, depending on the ATS, we can pull in like feedback submission time, feedback submission rate, some of the underlying data that's not necessarily just interview data. So we kind of marry interview data with ATS data here. And then we can roll it up into what we call like an interview quality dashboard. And so you can basically select the metrics that represent a great interview at your organization and kind of put them into a single scorecard. And this is really just intended to like roll up a lot of specific data into an aggregate to make it a little bit easier to get your arms around, who needs help, where does coaching need to happen? And I can group this by interview or department. In our case, we selected like on-time starts, talk ratio, speaking speed. Do we leave an opportunity for the candidate to ask questions? Do we set an agenda? Do we ask any problematic questions? Like those are the metrics that we put in our scorecard, and we can roll this up at an aggregate level. So if you, particularly if you're a company with hundreds or thousands of interviewers, there's really no other way to get your arms around, how are we doing? Where are we doing well? Who needs coaching? Who needs training? And so I can go from this to then drilling into the individual, to drilling into the metrics and provide coaching, or go to, my business stakeholders and provide actual data about the quality, of what we're doing. And again, there's a lot of metrics there, so I won't go into all of them. But let me pause there. There's a lot more actually really cool stuff coming on the insight side in the next month or so, but there's a lot there already today. It's quite robust. Cool. And then, once I surface a trend or something that's worth digging into, I want to coach around it. I want to enable around it. We want to drive continuous improvement because it's really important. And there's a few ways that you can do that. One I kind of showed you, which is I can get into the underlying data, and I'm just showing you a different example. So this is like, we have very robust search. So I filtered for just me as the interviewer, just a certain position, and where I pitched about BrightHire, because maybe I want to coach Ben on like the pitch. So I can go from very, very high level to like very, very granular really quickly to provide like one-to-one coaching. But then we can also build training programs in BrightHire. We have a whole training module. And so what you're seeing here is we've built a playlist of like choice cut clips, put them into a training program. We could even add like questions, like an assessment, and assign interviewees to this, because it's one thing to train people with like slides, particularly if it's around like calibration or things that are just kind of impossible to learn from text. It's a very different thing to learn from actual practice. And so we have folks that will use this from everything from very general, like best practices, how to sell the company, that sort of thing, to very, very granular. Like, here's how to do an architecture deep dive at our company. And this is the difference between what an L3, L4, L5 engineer sounds like, doing that assessment, because that's the stuff that gets so hard to train, coach, and enable. And if you can get folks calibrated on that quickly, it unlocks like massive efficiency in the process. There's a lot more here, but I've gone through a lot. So let me come back here. Let me pause for questions. I have a few more slides that I was going to kind of run through, which I can do. Let me actually do that quickly, and then I'll pause. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of cool stuff always coming. One area that we're investing a lot in is kind of how do we take all this amazing context at the candidate level and level up how confident folks feel about hiring decisions even more. And so there's a few things that we're doing there that I'm really excited about. These are like in development right now, very close to being released. One is summarizing all the context from a candidate at the candidate level. So for instance, we're hiring for an AE right now, and there are certain attributes that are really important for that role. We have these amazing AI notes at the interview level, but we're actually summarizing it now at the candidate level. So I could see kind of like this candidate level write-up, basically, that links out to all the underlying context that kind of builds as we run our interview loop, which is really exciting. And then we can even detect coverage. So if there's a set of 13 topics, competencies, skills that we think are really important as it relates to this role, we want to make sure we cover, because it's almost like a heat map of risk. If we don't get the things, then we have a blind spot. We can actually automatically detect, like, did we cover everything we wanted to cover, and to what extent, to feel very confident that we've checked all of our boxes as it relates to this role across this interview loop. So that's one thing that we're investing in. And then we're doing a lot as it relates to insights, just like more metrics, more time series, more auto coaching to interviewers, just a lot of really cool stuff coming in that regard. And the last thing I'll mention is the ability to use this data from an analysis perspective is pretty incredible. So this is an analysis that we did for a client of ours that hired, many account executives, sales roles, 100, and interviewed many more. And what we did was we automatically detected what topics and competencies and skills they were covering across those interview loops. And we could show them a map of how consistent are they? Like, what topics are they actually covering with this is the percentage of candidates they cover the topic with, this is the topic. And there were actually really important attributes that were part of their hiring profile that they turned out were not covering more than 50% of the time with candidates. And then we even took in outcomes data. So candidates that hit quota versus candidates that did not, and looked for variance, basically. So are there any patterns that we could detect? And we found actually that there were certain items, like there's one here that's around like overcoming adversity in the sales cycle, that they covered north of 85% of the time with the candidates that ended up becoming successful and hitting quota. And they covered like less than 20% of the time with folks that they hired and were not as successful. So, is that the answer for their quality of hire for AEs? Probably not, but it certainly seems like a really important thread to pull on as it relates to refining their assessment over time. This is more of a high volume environment, hiring environment, but this is a client of ours that it's a Fortune 50 company in the healthcare space. And we were able to actually pull compensation data, structured compensation data out of their conversations with candidates. So these are each roles. So RN med, emergency staff, grad med surge. This is the salary they were offering. So this is on an hourly basis to candidates. This is the hourly rate that candidates said that they were expecting. And this is the rate that they said that we're currently making today. So not every candidate's going to say all of this, but across many conversations, we could pull this out. And they were able to see, like, okay, we're kind of in line for RN emergency staff, but we're having a really hard time staffing med surge. Turns out it looks like we're quite below market from a comp perspective. So there's just really, mostly just to give you a sense for like the amazing possibilities there are from an insights perspective as it relates to interviews. And then lastly, we've invested a huge amount in security and compliance. We work with publicly traded companies, as this company I just mentioned, the healthcare space, it's Fortune 50. So we've done a lot of work on the compliance and security side, and an equal amount of work on the training, enablement, and support side. We have an amazing CS team. We've invested in a huge amount of assets. So all this, no product is good on its own. It takes like effective rollout, partnership, and getting the most out of a platform. And so we put a lot of time into that as well. Okay, that was a lot. Talked a lot. Let me stop. Hopefully it was helpful. And we'd love to answer your questions.
I know we're right about time, but
I went through the whole thing. I ran out of time.
you were on a roll.
Yeah,
you were on a roll. As we are about to jump, any questions, anything that y'all want to kind of dive into? Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Been super cool product, but I want to stop talking while we still have folks on the line.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Ben, around pricing.
Yeah. Oh, like you want me to give you the specific pricing?
Well, just like if you have an idea,
Yeah.
like a ballpark, just so people know.
Yeah, it ranges from like the low single-digit thousands for our smallest startups to, we're working with a Fortune 50 healthcare company. They're paying us hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. It's based on the size of the org. So I'm trying to remember, it's like 0 to 100, 100 to 250, 250 to 5. Those are kind of like the size org tiers. For many startups or companies, that may be represented here, being like somewhere in the 5 digits. I mean, again, it depends on the size of the company. I know the companies on this call, there's, Bill is publicly traded. I don't know the size of the range here, but that's kind of, there's a big range because we actually have I think most of our customers are probably between 500 and 10,000 employees, but we have, startups on our platform. It works great for them. And we have company with 160,000 employees hiring, 80,000 people a year on the platform. So it's a pretty big range, as you can imagine. Yeah.
Got it.
Don't let price be a determining factor, Mike.
What happens if you don't have any money?
I felt that
No,
becomes
I'm kidding.
hard. You know, I wish that wasn't a factor, obviously, but you know, we have some great people that build the product and work with our customers. So we gotta.
No, it's yeah, no, that was a good breakdown for a group of people. Anybody else want to jump in?
Ben, I don't know if this is okay. I mean, we are a customer. We just started our implementation with BrightHire. We've not seen it in practice, so we're definitely excited. We're actually taking in a phased in approach where we're starting with our Eng team, then we're adding our product team, then we're going to add our revenue team so that we can kind of scale it out over time. So again, that was just a flexible model that Ben and Teddy were willing to work with us on, because we didn't have an unlimited amount of money for it. So we had to sort of pick and choose which, you know, where to put the budget based on kind of the more critical areas of hiring for us.
Yeah, and that's not uncommon, you know, because sometimes it won't even be budget related, but it's, hey, our biggest thing is we have to hire, you know, in sales, we're scaling with the, you know, the go-to-market team, or there's a bunch of really important hires we're making, you know, on the AI and ML team, and, you know, quality hires paramount. We have a new leader who wants to make sure that everyone's well calibrated. And so, you know, that's not uncommon that we will start with like a specific challenge in mind. And then, you know, folks get wind of that it's really convenient and also makes their life easier. And then we end up kind of building out a broader relationship over time. But yeah, that model is, you know, pretty common, particularly for they got really, you know, our larger clients where, you know, those orgs are big.
If do you have the ability, like say if you were to hire for a specific department and people from that department have come and gone, is there a way to look at historical data and do some of these breakdowns on maybe why they didn't work out and what we could have missed? And
yeah, there's a couple ways that folks do that. One way is, you know, if you don't have huge numbers, there may not be a statistical amount of information to like run a regression, but just simply going back and saying, you know, Ben didn't work out for these reasons. What do we ask? What do we cover? What do we assess for? What did it sound like when we interviewed Ben? And is there anything that we can learn and deduce from, you know, just looking at a set of those interviews? Maybe it's a few different candidates. So there's a qualitative side, and people do that all the time. For a client like the one that I just shared, where they've hired 100 account executives, they're at a you know, significant size where we actually there's actually a lot of things. We have a REST API. They're like pulling data out of BrightHire because they're a big company and they're able to run their own regression on lots of stuff. You know, who interviewed them? What did we cover? What did we not cover? What do we hear? And so they're doing like a whole bunch of analysis at scale. That to, you know, and there's examples of that where it's like quality oriented to hit quote, you know, we want to hire sales reps to hit quota. And then we have really high volume clients where it's actually related to turnover. And so we've had a client in the healthcare, a different one in the healthcare space, more like the insurance space. And they had crazy first year attrition for kind of like their think of it as like customer service roles. And they used BrightHire. The first use case was going back and trying to figure out like, why is attrition so high? And is there anything we can do about it? We weren't like the sole factor because they did some other things as relates to onboarding as well. But one of them was just like realizing the way that they set expectations for the role, the way they articulated to candidates, and some of the specific questions and things that they probed into actually made a massive difference to bring on folks that were like well aligned to the role. And then they combined that with some things they were doing from an onboarding perspective. They brought their attrition down like 50%. I mean, from a very high base. Yeah. But yeah, you can do both.
oh. Hannah has balloons. That happens to me.
Yes. I don't have that Zoom thing yet. Like I'm still waiting to like get the thing that does yeah. I think I have to upgrade my Zoom client.
But I thought about turning it off, and then I thought, oh, it breaks it for the candidates, so they think, oh, look, she's silly, now I can relax.
Yeah, I like that. I don't know, I still haven't gotten that upgrade. I'm waiting for it. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you all for the time. I really appreciate it. Sorry for blowing through all the questions and all that. I was as I mentioned, there's a lot there, so
that was great.
Yeah, but I really appreciate the time. Yeah,
a lot of information. Love it.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's been a pleasure. Love learning about BrightHire today.
Thank you very much. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.